Welcome guys to the next episode, and today we're talking all about electronics for a RC drift car. So you got yourself a kit, amazing, but for it to be driving you need few things that are gonna make it happen. To start with, you need a ESC and you need a motor. So back in the days we used to use brushed motors like this one, little ESCs. They were often using Tamiya plug or something like that. The batteries were old type. Many of those ESCs didn't have the possibility of regulating and having a voltage cutoff. So if you're gonna run that without the protection on a Lipo battery, you're gonna damage the battery if you're gonna drain it to a too low level. But nowadays pretty much all of the ESCs are prepared for brushless motors like that. Many of them are for sensored motors, so that makes the whole thing easier. Now, can you drift with a brushed motor? Yes, and eventually I'm gonna swap it over and I'm gonna try it out and present to you that if you want to really go on a budget, you can reuse a cheapo old motor of yours or even get one second hand and still have fun with your drift car, because when it goes about drifting, the motor and the ESC is not as important as a servo and a gyro. So for the most part people are using 10.5 turn or 13.5 turn motors, and they do the trick perfectly. 13.5 got a little bit more torque, 10.5 got a little bit more speed. When it goes about the ESC, you can go with brushed from the old generation, you can go for a budget option, and in that case, as many others, I would recommend I would recommend a Hobbywing BL-120, especially that now the 120 came out as well as a G2, so generation 2, and it's got some improvements, but even the first one is absolutely brilliant as a budget option. Or you can go into higher models, like I've got a Hobbywing XR10 120 amps. It's got turbo and boost. At the moment I don't have the wire connected for the sensor that's in the motor. At the moment basically I do not need the turbo to set up the car and to get the feel for it. My suggestion is, do not go buy a €200 ESC straight away, because that will not make you a better drifter. Better other components will be a smarter solution to progress, and practice and alignment goes a long way, especially comparing to a twice as expensive motor, which might not be giving you actually twice as much performance comparing to the cheaper models. But once you're gonna get into competition and driving at a really high level, that's a different story. That's where you might want to really upgrade to something good, really good. But that's once everything else is sorted out. If you bought an MST or some of the other chassis, you might need for the motor the pinion, the little gear that's gonna move the spur gear on your transmission. They only cost few euros or few dollars, but they're not included in the box itself, so be wary of that. And another thing I wanted to mention about the ESCs is the fact that to take the full advantage of the turbo capabilities, of adjustable timing and other things on the motor and on the ECU, as well as to be able to change certain settings on the ECU, like switch on or switch off reverse gear, you will need some sort of a programmer. So if you're gonna go for the cheaper Hobbywing 10 BL-120, you can buy a program card which is about 10 euros, and it's a simple LED one. When you're gonna go into Xarun and some of the other higher models with more capability, you do need to get like a LCD type of a programmer like that. And with the highest models, and as well potentially to this one as well, I could get the newer ways to connect. So get a Bluetooth dongle, the OTA Bluetooth I think it's called, or OTA programmer by Hobbywing, and that will connect to my phone to an application, and I can change the settings on the fly. So it's something that needs to be taken into consideration, in my opinion, that the more expensive ESC, or it applies basically to many things, like the servo or the gyro, depending on what model you're using, might be programmable. It might be using programmer that will require you to buy another part for 10, 30 or maybe almost up to 50 euros, depending on what you're driving. And on top of that, once you're gonna get into Acuvance, into really expensive high-end stuff, Futaba servos from the really high models, they're not cheap. All of that kind of adds up, so take that under consideration, that to really enjoy the car, you need to enjoy it, you need to spend a certain amount of money. You can chip out, let's say, on the radio and on the motor and ESC for the time being when you're starting, and eventually upgrade it. So we got the pinion and the programmer out of the way. Next thing that you need is a servo and a gyro. In this case, at the moment, I've got a budget SPT 10 kilo servo mounted, and there's a Onisiki gyro that came with that as a whole package. I got as well a Futaba GYC 430 that I want to make a video on the car, if I can use it as a really budget option. And at the same time, I got the typical thing that I want to run, which is a Yokomo V4, and that is what I would recommend to everybody that's really starting and getting into it. Get yourself a good package of electronics, like this one, like the V4 by Yokomo, like the Futaba GYD 430, 470 or 550, although 550 is very advanced and will require more adjustment, and to really take the full advantage of it, you do need to have a quite expensive radio and rest of the gear to fully be able to utilize what you've paid for. But once you're at this level, I think you will get the gist. Another option would be a ReveD gyro, which if you got the servo and you bought the USB programmer, you can program the gyro with it as well. Talking about servos, apart from the SPT that's here, the cheaper one, I've got as well a ReveD servo. It's the RSST, the typical run-of-the-mill servo, which is proven by so many to be amazing value for money. I've got the USB programmer for it, so at some point, if you want me to make any more in-depth videos about certain things, let me know in the comments below, and I'll do my best to sort it out. But with a servo like that, even without the controller, it will be always a better, more stable, more smoother way to control the car than a cheap servo like the JN, like SPT. Further on, it was proven by roadside RC that Injora is actually working pretty well as a budget option. The thing with them is, not programmable, they cheaper ones, so you won't be able to use the whole gain of your gyro, and you might get some shakes. Basically, the better the gyro, the better the servo, the more you can program or adjust it so that it's efficient without having excessive wobble, so that it's stable and exactly it's moving the way you want it. Eventually I'm planning to make all kind of combinations around here with different gyros, with different servos and other things around, just to kind of show which way setup it's actually worth it. Because for the most part that can drift at this moment with the cheapo SPT servo and the Onisiki gyro, but I wouldn't take it to a circuit. It's driftable enough to mess about with in a car park or on a spot with your mate, but it's not really there if you want it to be really controlling it. Now, to be able to control the whole thing, it's the next thing that you need. You need a receiver and you need a radio of some sort. Now, if you're gonna go, that's my old Sanwa, if you're gonna go for something like that, it's gonna work the same way as this work Futaba. If you're operating it like this, or if you're operating it like this, it doesn't matter. They work the same. It's just the shape of it, and if you feeling that that's more comfortable for you, like a helicopter or aero type of receiver transmitter, that's cool. Most people are using one with the wheel and the trigger, so the choice is yours. Now, why I've got few of them, again, back in the days, so 10 years ago when I was playing with stuff, you'd buy those, they worked fine, they had certain frequencies they were operating on, and they required a little chip which is called a crystal. You needed to have two of them. One would go in the radio and the second one would go into your receiver, and that's how they were basically bind together. Now, I would not recommend going and messing about with that. That is a Skyfly GT3B. You can buy, usually they are known with the model as the model C, which is orange. The main difference is slightly different buttons, and the model B got normal batteries, AA's, the model C got Lipo battery in here, and pretty much that's all. When it goes about the usability and what you can do with it, is the same thing. Sorry, you could just hear the doggy drinking. So what I would recommend for the most people, I would recommend a Futaba 3 PV or a Sanwa MX6. They are around £100, dollars or euros, and they are a very good beginners type of entry level if you want to have a, let's call it, trouble-free type of experience. Now I went for the lower level, so that is a radio that you can buy for I think 60 odd or 70 odd euros or dollars, brand new, with a receiver. I've picked this one up second hand locally for 20 euros with a receiver, and it works. It had a little broken thing here, it got glued together, but it works. You put it on, you got everything that you need, you set it up, you're off driving. And the good thing about this one is I wouldn't recommend buying it for more than 40 or 50 euros. There's other cheap makes that do good quality radios at a really reasonable price. This one works. I've tried it, it works fine. It's an older model, It doesn't have all of the fancy stuff, but what you need is it's displayed on the screen. It gives you voltage of the batteries and everything else, and you got a third channel which you can operate. Now if you're gonna connect your gyro to the third channel on the receiver, you will be able to adjust the gyro gain on the remote. Now note, if the gyro on your vehicle is going 0 to 100 or 0 to -100, guys that been using that found the trick that you basically need to reverse the third channel if you want to go to the other side of the zero. If you're gonna, because the main adjustment on it is 0 to 100. So if you want to go 0 to -100, you just flip it into reverse on channel 3 and it does the trick perfectly. And like I said, I've paid 20 euros for that. With that, I've broke, on the receiver that I got, I've already broke the aerial. I've ripped the antenna out, but I've managed to solder it back on, and it works. In the meanwhile, I've ordered me a brand new receiver, so I've got a spare one. That was 11 euros delivered. Some of the receivers for the more expensive radios are significantly more expensive. So in some cases, depending where you live, they might be hard to come by. So have a look around, depending where you live, what's available and in what sort of prices. Because it might be, if you're in Europe, if you're more towards Japan and stuff, you might be better off going with a Sanwa. If you're in the States, Sanwa is not as popular as far as I'm aware, so you're more kind of in the direction of Futaba, or you can look at the Dumbo RC or Fly Sky and few other makes that might just do something which is good enough for you. Now granted, pretty much every radio will be good and will work, and it will allow you to drive the car around. But the thing is, at certain point the radio stops being precise and fast enough so that while drifting it might start causing you trouble. So too cheap of a radio and too slow of a radio, it might be better off for crawling, bashing and things like that, rather than for, let's call it, high speed precise drifting. The last thing that you need is some sort of a power supply, so in that case a battery. Back in the days we used batteries like that. They are nickel, I'm not sure what's the actual chemical name, apologies, NEMH. They worked fine, but and they still reasonably cheap, but most of them came with the Tamiya plug, which is actually a very high resistance plug, and nowadays they should not be used anymore. Basically they're not efficient for, especially for a drift car like that. So but luckily you can easily change them on any battery. The plug is a easy and relatively cheap thing to replace. It's not a problem. So for the old ESCs, for the brush systems, yeah, you can still use that. But for the new ESCs with turbo boost censored motors, it will be, let's call it, short-lived, in the sense of it's gonna give you a significantly less runtime comparing to a Lipo battery. So considering the fact that the prices nowadays of Lipos comparing to that are fairly similar, I mean rather cheaper Lipos, I would go with a Lipo straight away. I wouldn't go with the old type, because They're just significantly less efficient than the Lipos, and there's no point paying the same money for something which is not as good. So next thing, and what you had for them was a simple type of a charger. You just plug it in, you leave it in your wall, and jobs are good. So when you get a Lipo, I got here like a typical crawler type of a battery. I'm still waiting for my shorties to arrive, and often you use actually plugs, couple of single plugs that are coming straight from your EWS to go into the battery, where here I've made a makeshift adapter so I can run the battery while still retaining the DINS connector, because I'm not sure where the battery gonna end up in what sort of a project. So I just made it work for testing purposes here. So one thing is with the Lipo batteries, they are not as safe as the old batteries. Lipo batteries are dangerous. I've got there a little bag to store it and to charge it in, and those bags cost 5, 10, 15 euros or dollars. Get yourself a Lipo bag, Lipo charging bag. That basically it might just save you a lot of hassle and a lot of bad things in case your battery gonna go wrong. Now the situation is, you can get for them a really basic like charger. I would not recommend that. Yeah, basically you don't really have much control with them, with the cheapo chargers. What I would suggest is to get at least like a IMAX, that's a Sky RC charger, and here you can actually set up what's the power that you want to charge it with, how many cells got the battery. You need to make sure you're charging the battery the right way. So there are a few options. If you want, I'll make a longer video about it. You plug your battery to the balancing cord here, and then the power to here, and that allows the battery to be equally charged across the cells and leveled out. I would say it's very important to be charging balanced. That's one thing, rather than unbalanced. And if you're done with it, if you're not planning to be using it for the next day, 2 or longer, then definitely go into the storage option and put the battery into storage. Basically that lowers the voltage of the battery and puts it in a safe spot where it's less reactive, let's call it. Now, one thing with the batteries that you really want to make sure you look at is if they're not getting fluffy, if they're not puffing up. I've got here, I've got here an old power bank of mine, and I've just opened it up because it started basically suddenly puffing up and opening the carcass, and the whole battery is at a quite dangerous level of being puffed up. That needs to be disposed of. That is not safe. Do not pierce it. Do not, basically be careful with that, because that can set on fire, and it's not a small fire, it's an electrical and chemical fire which will burn things down if you're not careful. And you will not just pour a glass of water on it and extinguish it. No, you're gonna be in a world of trouble. So always get yourself a Lipo battery bag for charging. It's a really small price to pay for a lot of safety, and it's not that it's gonna extinguish the fire, it's gonna contain everything perfectly. because the smoke's still gonna come out, and that's not good for you to be breathing. But if it's in the bag, you can grab it and you can chuck it out of the house or into a safe spot which won't burn everything around. So yeah, Lipo batteries are amazing, but they are dangerous. They need certain way of using just to be safe. And I think at this moment that's all, because once you got those electronics assembled, you can go and start practicing. And obviously you're gonna need some sort of a body on it, but we'll get to that in the next video. If that video is useful for you, hit that like button. I really appreciate it, and it helps the channel tremendously. If you're interested, hit the subscription and the bell button, because that will allow me to know that I'm going in the right direction and make more videos that can help other people. If you want me to go deeper into any of the subjects, into any of the parts that I've got, let me know. I'll try to do a video of that. Thanks for watching, and as always, I'll see you on the next one. Keep it sideways.